In 1944, on a secluded and remote Japanese island, there lived a man and a woman who worked as farmers. Until one day, the sea washed ashore a small boat carrying 31 Japanese soldiers. Since they had nowhere else to go, they stayed there. Thus, the island's population became 32 men and only one woman. At first, things went smoothly. They got along, and what little they had, they shared. But then, their instincts kicked in, and they all turned their attention to the only woman on the island. That's when their entire lives changed. The events of today's story took place on a Japanese island called Anatahan, isolated alone in the Pacific Ocean, and a bit far from the Asian continent. Its area is only 32 square kilometers. Anatahan is known for its many volcanoes, so many that many Japanese lived there at the beginning of the last century. However, they later grew afraid for themselves and their families because of those volcanoes, and they eventually migrated from it forever. A long time passed, and the island was deserted. Nobody ever entered it or even passed by it because, besides its volcanoes, it was very far from other islands and difficult to reach. But after years and years of it being empty, in 1944, at the height of World War II, Japan sent people there to work in agriculture, to plant and harvest, and the state would benefit from the yield. At first, they sent many people, but as the war intensified, Japan needed manpower, which affected that decision. They brought back the people they had sent, and in the end, left only one woman and two men there. The first man was named Kiku Ichiro, the second was called Shuichi Higa, and the woman, Shuichi's wife, was named Kazuko Higa, and she was 28 years old. These three lived well on the island. They ate and drank and took care of their work, and they lacked nothing. Even though they were afraid that something bad would fall on them, a reference to the war, at least they were far from everything. They remained in this state for about 3 months until one day, they heard on the radio that America had colonized the Mariana Islands. The problem here was that Shuichi's family and Kazuko's family were there. When he heard this news, he panicked and decided to leave the island for the island where his family lived to check on them. His wife, Kazuko, didn't want him to leave. She insisted he stay and not leave her alone. But he refused, telling her, "I must go see my family and see if they are in danger and find a way to bring them here to be near me." She said, "If you don't want to stay, I'll go with you." He refused this request, too, because he was afraid she might die on the road or something might happen to her. He told her, "You will not go anywhere. You will stay here and don't worry, I won't be gone for more than a month, and I will be back." So the next day, he prepared the boat and prepared himself to leave, and before starting his sea journey, he entrusted Kiku to look after her and protect her. This decision was not easy for Shuichi, to leave his wife alone with a man that is neither related to her in an island where there are no women except her. It was very difficult for him, but he had no choice. He had to go check on his family. The first month passed, and Kazuko was waiting for her husband to return, but he didn't. The second, third, and fourth months passed, and still nothing. The man had disappeared without a trace, until they thought he might have died. And thus, Kazuko remained alone with Kiku on the island of Anatahan. At that time of World War II, Japan was the one in control of the Asian continent, and it colonized many countries, such as Korea and Taiwan, and made a big fuss even with America after it hit one of its military bases. From there, a big mess ensued between them, and America, of course, wanted to take revenge. On July 12, 1944, in the middle of that Great War, a Japanese ship carrying many people and heading to the capital of the Mariana Islands was attacked by an American airplane, and it began striking with bullets until the ship sank. It was carrying hundreds of Japanese people, and all of them died except for 31 people. These 31 people managed to escape in a small boat, and the waves of the sea washed them ashore on the island of Anatahan. Kiku and Kazuko, as I told you earlier, were the only people living on that island. As soon as they saw those 31 people entering the island, they were not happy and were very afraid, especially Kiku, because Kazuko's husband had entrusted his wife to him, and now how was he going to protect her from 31 people? Although those people seemed like Japanese like them, but still their intentions were unknown whether they were good or bad and barbaric. Before Kiku and Kazuko went out and showed themselves to their new guests, Kiku came up with an idea. He said to Kazuko, "What do you think about us pretending to be married? This way, none of those people will covet you." And of course, since she had no other way to protect herself, she agreed. Anyway, after the men entered the island, they went to them and welcomed them well, and showed them all the places where they could get fruits and vegetables. The island was rich. It was full of trees, bananas, coconuts, and many other fruits. In addition to that, they could hunt the animals that lived there, and also fish from the sea. So, they had a way to stay alive. Afterward, they built tents there with tree leaves to sleep in at night. They even made alcohol to drink to have fun among themselves. Anyway, they got used to living there and were happy and comfortable. But things were going to get more difficult for them when 4 months had passed since the day they arrived on the island. The food began to decrease because there were too many of them, and they had finished all the fruits and vegetables that were there. Although they had replanted the lands, it would still take time to give the harvest again. Then, they began to hunt the large animals a lot until they finished them. They then started to cook grass and eat it. They even hunted snakes, spiders, frogs, and everything else to eat so they wouldn't die of hunger. As for the fish, even though it was present in the sea, it was difficult to fish enough for all those people. Even though they were fighting to find something to eat, they knew that one day Japan would rescue them from the island and they would return home. But they were wrong. Japan at that time had started losing the war, and it didn't have the time or energy to think about them and find a solution for them. The only solution they had to get out of there was America, because those areas of the island and some other areas had come under its control. But even then, if America had, for example, sent them a ship to take them back, it was impossible to trust them and go with them because they were afraid that they would kill them or enslave them. And so, in the end, when they saw that there was no hope of getting out of there, they accepted their fate and accepted the idea that the island was the place where they would live forever. In January of 1945, after 6 months of fighting with hunger and lack of food, an American plane crashed in the middle of the island after the pilot was unable to control it. Luckily, it didn't fall on anyone, but all the American soldiers in it died. When the people of the island saw that a plane had crashed there, they all gathered and went running to it. They were carrying stones and wooden sticks because they were afraid that there were still some enemy soldiers alive. But after they arrived, they didn't find anyone alive. Kiku told them, "Let's go inside the plane. We might find some things there that will benefit us." And he was right, because when they went inside, they found many things that would benefit them and help them in their lives on that island. They found knives, ropes, and iron pieces with which they made hooks to fish from the sea. They made new clothes with their parachutes, and they even covered their tents with them so that the rain wouldn't enter when it fell. They emptied the oxygen bottles that were there and turned them into water bottles suitable for drinking. In short, they tried as much as possible to benefit from everything they found there. And out of all of this, the most valuable thing they found there were 3 rifles with their bullets. When they found them, they were very happy and said that with these 3 rifles they would be able to protect themselves if one day the enemy attacked them. They took those weapons and left them in the tent of 2 of the men who were considered to be the leaders of that island. But these rifles that they were very happy with and that made them feel safe were going to bring a curse upon them, and instead of using them against the enemy, they would use them against each other. Shortly after the American plane crashed on Anatahan, America sent its ship to the island because it had received news that its plane had crashed there. It at least wanted to retrieve the bodies of those soldiers to their families. Even though the people on the island didn't trust the American soldiers, they allowed them to enter the island and retrieve their soldiers' bodies. Before leaving, they wanted to do them a favor and get them out of the island and take them back to their homes in Japan, but they didn't want to, and they didn't trust them. They said that this was probably just a trap, and if they went with them, they would kill them. And so they decided to stay there on the island. In August of 1945, after a few months had passed since the end of the biggest war in the history of mankind, America assigned dozens of its planes to fly over the islands where no news was reaching and drop them newspapers and messages that said that World War II had ended and told them that there was no longer any animosity with anyone. The newspapers and messages reached even the island of Anatahan, and when the Japanese read them, They immediately said that this was just a trap, and that the war had not ended, and that they wanted them to trust them and go back with them so they would kill them. A year and a half passed, and they were still living on the island, until they were 100% used to it, and even their affairs were no longer as bad as before. They were now hunting large amounts of fish, which was enough for all of them. The lands that they had planted started giving their yield again. Vegetables, fruits, etc. And so they felt like they lacked nothing and became comfortable with their lives there. However, they had one problem. There were no women, and on the entire island, there was only one woman. And here is where the big problems between them will begin. In 1946, a rumor spread among them that Kazuko was not married to Kiku, and that they only lied to them so that no one would try to approach her. How did this rumor spread? All because of Kiku. During this whole time, while he and Kazuko were pretending to be married, it was as if he had begun to like her, and as if he wanted her to be his alone, and when he saw her talking to other men on the island, he would become jealous and begin arguing with her over the smallest things. Kazuko was fed up with this. What's wrong with this guy? Why does he treat me like this? One day, she was gathered with one of the other men, and she told him the truth. Kiku and I are not married at all. We lied to you so that no one would covet me, and now he thinks he can control my life. She asked the man not to tell this to anyone, but he didn't listen to her. He spread this talk to everyone on the island. Once the news spread that Kazuko was a widow and not married to Kiku, everyone wanted her to be his, and they all entered into a big competition over who would win her. Here, the two men who had the rifles began to impose their control over the other men. They told them, "Since we are the ones who have weapons, then we are the ones who will take Kazuko." And they did begin to control her even though she didn't want it, but at the same time, she couldn't refuse because she was afraid for her life. Just a few days after this, one man out of the 31 people was killed in mysterious circumstances. They found his body under a banana tree, and he was hit in the head. At first, they said that maybe he climbed the tree to cut bananas and his foot slipped and he fell directly on his head and died. But the strange thing about this was that the man who died was the only person who had a big animosity with the two men who had the weapons, and he was the only one who opposed their decision that they were the ones who would take Kazuko, and he was the one who wanted to take her. So, it's more likely that he didn't fall from the tree, but that they killed him to get rid of him. The other men realized this and knew that this man was probably murdered and that those two men did it. And from that moment, everyone became afraid of them and began to be wary of them. And those two, when they saw that everyone was afraid of them, they felt like they had control of that island. One day, they went directly to Kazuko, and they entered her tent and said to her, "What do you think about coming to live with us in our tent? We will protect you from all these men who are going around you." Kiku, her husband or the one who pretended to be her husband, was also in the tent at that time, and he just stood there looking and wasn't able to do anything because he was afraid for his life. They would just get rid of him. They are in an island where there is no police, no law, nothing, meaning that they would kill him, and they wouldn't be punished for what they did. Kazuko didn't know what to do. She was feeling very weak among them because she was the only woman in the middle of a society of all men. At first, she was frozen and couldn't speak. She didn't say yes or no. But in the end, she saw that she had no choice and decided to go live with them in their tent. Exactly 2 weeks passed after this. One of the two men who had weapons was also found dead in mysterious circumstances. They found his body thrown in a forest on that island, and he also died from a hit in the head in the same way as the first man had died. When Kiku saw these men dying, he and Kazuko began to fear for their lives. He even went to her, and in front of all the men who were there, he disavowed her and said that he was no longer considered her husband and that he would never come near her again, as if he was showing them that he was no longer with them in the competition they were in over Kazuko and that he no longer wanted to get close to her. As for the other men, they continued the competition and the fight over the girl. Something called trust no longer existed on that island. Everyone there became wary of their neighbor. After a few more days, the leader who remained in possession of the weapons was also found dead, and they threw him into the sea. They picked him up and buried him, and they didn't know what exactly happened to him. Did he go fishing and drown, and that's it? Or did one of those men kill him? Or maybe he slipped into the water, and the water brought him back to the island? No one knows. Here, Kazuko became even more afraid, because 2 of the men that she was staying with were killed, and now there was no man beside her. And since she didn't trust anyone, that's why she decided to go back to Kiku and beg him to take her back and protect her. At first, he refused because before he had told all the men there that he disavowed her and no longer wanted her and would never come near her again. But after he saw that she was really stuck and very afraid and could not spend the night in the tent of the 2 men who were killed by herself, he took pity on her and allowed her to spend the night with him in his tent. Unfortunately, this good deed that he did for her was going to turn against him because Kiku would die only 5 days after she returned to live with him in his tent. One day, they found him in his tent blue and foaming at the mouth. Everyone said that he probably died of food poisoning, but between themselves, they knew that he had been killed, too. The reason was because he took Kazuko. And from that moment, literally, anyone who went near Kazuko or took her to live with him in his tent didn't last for long before they died in mysterious circumstances. The problem is that no one knew who was doing it. Even though each time one of them was dying, they still weren't afraid, and they continued this competition and fight over her. She looked to them like a prize that the strongest man could win. 3 days after Kika died, they again found the body of another one of them, stabbed 13 times with a knife. After a short while, the waves of the sea washed ashore the body of another one of them, who was also stabbed with a knife. This is in addition to some other men who were never found, and disappeared altogether, and their bodies were found neither in the sea nor on the island. Imagine with me that out of the men, whose number in total was 32, there were now only 20 of them. 12 of them died, and the reason was because of Kazuko. Anyone who tried to get close to her or take her would die. In 1950, after 6 years of them being on that island, all the men who remained alive sat together for the first time in a long time and began to talk about the subject of Kazuko. In the end, they realized that all of these problems that had been going on between them for over 4 years, the main reason behind them was Kazuko. They said, "Why are we fighting each other over her? She is the problem, and if she had not been here from the beginning on this island, we would have never argued and fought each other." They considered Kazuko to be the cause of all of this, and imagine with me the solution they came up with and all agreed on, to kill her so that there would no longer be anything for them to fight over. Of course, what they wanted to do was injustice to her, because she did nothing, and they were the ones who fought over her, and now they were considering her the root of the problem and wanted to get rid of her for good. Fortunately for her, one man of the 10 didn't like the idea of killing Kazuko. He waited until they dispersed, and he ran to her and told her everything. He told her, "Now you have to hide because they agreed to kill you." When Kazuko heard this news, she began to cry from fear, and after she didn't know what to do and where to go, she threw herself on her knees before that man, begging him to hide her in some place until she found a chance to escape the island. Although he was afraid, he took pity on her and decided to hide her. The place he hid her in was a corner of the island that was very far from where they were, and they never went there because there was nothing there. That evening, they began searching for her to execute her, but they couldn't find her. They searched every corner of the island, and it was as if even the man who had hid her was acting like he was searching with them. And when he saw them heading toward the corner where he had hidden her, he would try to distract them and make them go back. Days passed, and the woman didn't appear. Finally, they said that maybe she threw herself into the sea and died there, and that was it. None of them were still searching for her. The man who had been hiding her was sneaking out to see her every day and taking food to her. Because if he didn't take food to her, she would die of hunger. 2 weeks passed, and things were like this. And finally, Kazuko started feeling like she couldn't stay hidden. Every day she would cry over her condition and say to herself, "Sooner or later, they are going to find me." She was beginning to think of facing her reality and going out to them so that they would kill her and she would be relieved. But luckily for her, the man who was hiding her came to her one day and told her that he saw an American ship from afar heading toward the island. He asked her, "Are you willing to risk your life and go with them? They might kill you. They might keep you alive." Kazuko, without even thinking for a second, told him, Take me in the direction they are coming from. I want to go with them." She was sure that if she stayed there, she would die. So, she just took the risk. After he took her to the direction where the ship was coming from, he returned home and left her there signaling to them. Luckily, they saw her and went to her, and she got on the ship. It was really an American ship, and the soldiers on it were Americans, but they weren't planning anything bad. On the contrary, they reassured her and told her that she had nothing to fear, that the war had ended, and they wouldn't harm her. From there, they took her directly to Japan, and specifically to Tokyo, and that's where she told them everything. And she told them that there were still 20 people on the island of Anatahan, and those 20 people still thought that the war was going on and were unable to get out of there because they were afraid. At that time, America again sent another ship to that island, and this time, they took with them even the families of those people who were there so that they would trust them and go with them. And the idea worked. As soon as the ship arrived there, and those people saw their families, immediately and without hesitation, they jumped and got on the ship. In 1951, after 7 years of those men living on the island, they finally got out of it and returned to their homes in Japan. These are their pictures when they were just leaving the island and when they had just returned. At that time, there were only 20 men left out of 32, meaning that 12 of them had died. Anyway, after Kazuko had told them the entire story of what happened there, it amazed many people, and she received many job offers with companies that wanted to turn her story into books and films. She became a famous woman in Japan, and everyone called her the Queen of Anatahan, because she was the only woman on the island where there were only men. Though to me, she doesn't seem like a queen here, because from the moment those 31 men set foot on the island, they were fighting over her, and her life was in danger. As for the men who were also rescued, some of them wrote books about their story on that island, and they were lying about the story that Kazuko had told people. They said that she was a manipulative person and that she was playing with the minds of the men and that she was causing them to fight each other over her. We don't know who's telling the truth, because we weren't with them on the island. What we learn from this whole thing is that a person is willing to turn on his friend who is close to him in order to get what he wants. As for her first husband, Sui-Chi, who had told her, "I am going to go check on my family," she received news that he got married. "I will come back to you in a month." He went and got married, and not only did he get married, but he had 2 children. I don't know what exactly Kazuko did after she started a new life, but I found some information that said that she found a man and married him in a small village in Japan, and she continued her life until she died. This was today's story. Thank you very much for finishing it to the end. Don't forget to support me with likes. And as always, we'll meet again in a new story. Take care.